Welcome back to the decks of Titanic for another Titanic tour. In the last episode, we took a look at boiler rooms 5 and 6, as well as the fiddlies and ash places. In this episode, we'll have a look at the crew companionway known as Scotland Road, as well as the reciprocating engine room. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more Titanic tours. Today, we'll start our tour in Titanic's famous Scotland Road. If you were part of Titanic's crew and wanted to get from one side of the ship to the other, you would use Scotland Road. It spanned the entire length of the ship. It was located on the port side of E-deck. It accommodated most of Titanic's 900 crew members. We're now looking at one of the many escape doors used to get in and out of the boiler rooms in case of an emergency. Leading stoker Fred Barrett used this door when he re-entered boiler room 6 to find 8 feet of water had already flooded in. Scotland Road played a big part in the sinking as it allowed water to flow freely throughout the port side of E-deck. The Titanic took on a significant list to port because of this. We're now in a steward's lavatory. This is where the 329 stewards on board would come to use the bathroom. The crew of Titanic were very impressed with the accommodations on board. Many ships at the time had terrible accommodations for crew, but Titanic changed all that. Scotland Road was named after a major road in Liverpool, England, which is still in use today. Liverpool was also the headquarters of White Star Line, and many of the crew had connections to the city. This room is where second-class stewards would come to sleep. Stewards were essential to the smooth operation of Titanic at sea. They performed over 57 different tasks aboard Titanic. Many were employed in the dining saloons of each class, public rooms, cabins, and other recreational areas on the ship. Each class had their own bath and bedroom stewards. They were tasked with keeping areas supplied, assisting passengers with dressing and serving passengers food if they desired to eat in their cabin. Traveling aft, apart from the first-class cooks, most of the sleeping quarters were occupied by stewards and waiters, as well as many escape doors for the boiler rooms and the third-class dining room. In the wreck, pipes from the ceiling have fallen down and blocked what's left of the corridor. Only the forward section of Scotland Road is still explorable. On one of James Cameron's expeditions, he explored the forward section of Scotland Road, as well as the escape doors of Boiler Room 5 and 6. These stairs lead to the third-class dining room. This companionway was also used by third-class passengers to traverse from one end of the ship to the other. Unfortunately for the third class, their spaces were in the bow or stern of the ship, so they had to walk the entire length of the ship sometimes, depending on where their cabin is. As we look forward towards the bow, we can see the shear. You can see how the ship bends down towards the middle of the ship, with the highest points being the bow and stern. This provided stability and minimized the amount of water splashing up on the deck in rough sea. The steel wall on our left is the reciprocating engine casing. We're walking at about the height of the cylinder heads of the steam engines. This door is where the 24 engineers and 6 electrical engineers would have entered the ship in Southampton. This is where Titanic's engineering crew would come to eat, in the engineer's mess. This room had a small pantry and could accommodate 36 people. It being so close to the engine rooms was a perfect location to eat and quickly get back to work. We're now looking into the reciprocating engine room of Titanic, a mighty 30,000 horsepower, combined between both reciprocating engines, with a further 16,000 added by the turbine engine, for a total of 46,000 horsepower. This massive amount of horsepower made Titanic speed through the water at up to 23 knots. We're now looking at the aft low-pressure cylinder. This is the last cylinder that would have received steam before heading back to the turbine engine. It would have received steam at about 24 psi. Then once it passed through the engine, it would be exhausted back to the turbine at 9 psi. The intermediate pressure cylinder was running 78 psi, and the one we're looking at now is the high-pressure cylinder, which ran at 215. The steam from the boilers was fed directly into the high-pressure cylinder. Then the triple expansion process would start. Each cylinder using the exhausted steam at lower pressure until it's exhausted through massive black exhaust pipes back to either the turbine engine or the massive condensers in the turbine engine room. The reciprocating engine room had many steam pumps for feed water heading back to the boilers and also housed the refrigeration plant, used for keeping the refrigerated areas in the stern cool. It also held other auxiliary equipment like an auxiliary condenser, also things like feed filters, and contact heaters for sending condensed steam back to boilers as feed water. As we look down, we can see the two yellow reversing engines. These were connected to what's known as a reversing shaft. The reversing shaft was connected to the valves of the engine by a drag link, and when manipulated will cause the engine to either run in reverse or forwards. This is the main piston for the aft low-pressure cylinder. All of this would have needed to be oiled by a crew of greasers. The cylinders had oil pots that could be filled with oil to lubricate the cylinder wall. The bearings were oiled by an engine-driven pump, but that's about it. The rest would have been oiled by men with oil cans. We can now get a better look at how the reversing engine is connected to the reversing shaft. Those big gray cylinders are called steam separators. They take the wet steam from the boilers and turn it into dry steam so it can be run through the engines. The last thing you want in any kind of engine is water. These are the valves for the intermediate and high-pressure cylinder. These black pipes carry exhaust steam back to the turbine engine room. We can see how the valves and pistons connect to the crankshaft here. Lots to be oiled. As we walk over to the starboard side, we see all the hot well tanks and main feed pumps needed for pumping the condensed steam back to the boilers. Here are the telegraphs which tell the engineers what speed the bridge would like the ship to go. As we walk aft, we see telephones. These would be used to communicate with the bridge. When your engines were all warmed up and ready to be run, you could call up the bridge and ask if the props were clear for a test run. After you were given the OK, you could order the engine to be run forward by manipulating the reversing engine, then crack open the maneuvering throttle till the engine started to spin. Here we can see our throttle controls. The big one on the left is your main throttle, and would only be used after you got out of port. The middle control is your maneuvering throttle and would only be used in port or for test running the engine. The last wheel is your turbine start. It would introduce a little bit of steam into the turbine engine to help with startup. The countless men needed to keep this machine running must have been amazed by the top-of-the-line technology they were lucky enough to experience. Both reciprocating engines were 63 feet tall and weighed 720 tons. Now we'll go check out the reciprocating engine casing, which goes all the way up to boat deck. At the top there's skylights which can be opened to let fresh air and light down into the room. The tank sitting in the engine casing is called a contact heater. It would heat the feed water up to near boiling before being sent back to the boilers. We can now see the open skylights letting light and air down into the bowels of the ship. It goes all the way up 6 decks to boat deck. We finish off our tour at the entrance to the reciprocating engine room. Thanks for watching another Titanic tour. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Titanic tours. In the next episode, we'll check out the rest of Scotland Road and the turbine engine room. Thanks for watching.